So today we saw a big rally with Tesla stock. In fact, we saw Tesla stock bounce off of that 215 price area that I mentioned in yesterday's video. In fact, this is a price area that not only did I mention it in yesterday's video, but I've been talking about it for quite a while now. But along with Tesla stock, we also had a great intraday trade with Microsoft for the Push and Profit private group. For example, today at 9:24 a.m., I said, for today, I'll be watching Microsoft and looking to short or get 307.5 puts once the price is greater than 320.90. Now this was an amazing intraday trade call out. For example, Microsoft pretty much hit it almost to the penny, getting rejected for our entry area to get puts or start shorting Microsoft at that price level. So if you guys want access to my daily trade ideas as well as my overarching view on the overall markets, make sure to check out the links in the description below for access to the Push and Profit private group. But let's go ahead and talk about what we saw today. For example, it wasn't only Tesla stock that went up. If we take a look into the QQQs, the overall NASDAQ index ETF, we see that the overall market pretty much rallied up today, with Nvidia stock definitely having a great push today as well. Now, Nvidia was a stock that I talked about this Sunday when I sent out my free weekly newsletter, which, by the way, if you guys are not signed up, definitely go ahead and check that out. It's going to be in the links in the description below, where every single Sunday I send out a newsletter of what's going on in the overall markets. It's completely free. But basically last Sunday, what I was talking about is that Nvidia is a huge AI power play, right? Because of the fact that we went ahead and broke down the difference between CPUs and GPUs for individuals that are not really tech enthusiasts. And what we talked about is that Nvidia basically controls 80% of the market when it comes to GPUs. And this is huge because GPUs are pretty much what's used when it comes to a lot of these AI, generative AI, companies, right? And so what we wanted to take a look into for this week is obviously seeing how Nvidia does for its earnings, because this is going to tell us, is the AI hype and rally officially done, or is it actually going to continue going further? Now, we saw for this quarter, a lot of the companies have continuously frequently mentioned the topic of artificial intelligence or AI in their recent earnings report. In fact, we've heard that more frequently this quarter than last quarter. So we absolutely want to pay attention to Nvidia, because Nvidia has a huge weighting on the overall markets. And so we definitely want to take a look at what this big power player does when the earnings come out, because that could shape the direction for the overall markets. But one thing that we do want to be cautious about is that we're still seeing the 10-year treasury note continue to go ahead and trickle upwards, which is definitely not good. Now, a multitude of different times on the channel, I've said that, hey, when these 10-year treasury notes are high and they're at these, 4.3 levels and above, that's not necessarily good for the overall markets. Why is that? Well, that could drain liquidity from the markets, because investors have more of an incentive to take capital away from equities and stocks and put it into, these 10-year treasury yields where they're going to get this guaranteed return. And so this is something that we want to pay attention to. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop and really just talk about a couple of things in further detail in regards to Tesla and the overall markets. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop. Now, for this portion of the video, I do want to just talk about a couple of topics in regards to Tesla stock, starting off with something that I think is very important, right? And that's the fact that, yes, in yesterday's video, I did talk about Tesla stock most likely bouncing up from the 215 area. Actually, I've mentioned that in several previous videos for a while now, that was going to be a big area of focus of whether or not Tesla was going to bounce up. And I said most likely it was going to bounce up from that area. However, unfortunately, I do have to give this disclaimer, and it's kind of a sad thing that I have to give this disclaimer, but I want to give this friendly reminder that at the end of the day, I don't necessarily have a crystal ball. Yes, we have been on target with a lot of the call outs we've said with Tesla, not only from, the earnings of the 19th, but pretty much from the beginning of the year, and even going back into 2022, if you guys have been with me that long. But one of the things you have to understand is I don't have, just access to the future. I just look at multiple different data points, and I have a more dynamic approach to, pretty much entering into the market, right? I often say that you don't want to just rely on technical analysis. You don't want to just rely on fundamental analysis. And this is why I often cover several different topics. And sometimes I do get hate from it. Sometimes I do see in the comment section below, individuals may say, well, why are you talking about NVIDIA's earnings? Or why are you talking about Apple's earnings or Walmart's earnings? And I try to stress out the reason why you want to look at several different earnings for other companies, as that may shape the direction for the market. I'm not going to repeat what I've said in the past with Apple and with Walmart or even Amazon, right? But I will talk about a little bit of NVIDIA. Now, for those, and this is just a recap for those who don't have access to the weekly newsletters, which is completely free. So one of the things we talked about is how, NVIDIA is a company that manufactures or actually sells a lot of these GPU chips, which is pretty much what fuels the whole AI section, right? And so if NVIDIA has a good earnings report, right, and we're seeing that there is some optimism, NVIDIA is popping up, which if you traded NVIDIA today, congratulations. It definitely did awesome today, right? And so we want to see, well, if NVIDIA continues or shows that they have a good earnings and provides good forward guidance, well, that could continue the market to or that could fuel the market to continue rallying up. Let's take a look at the QQQs, right? And let's look at it from a weekly time frame. So pretty much the story or the narration so far for the first half of 2023 was AI, right? So many companies in the first quarter mentioned about artificial intelligence, and you also see it even mentioned much more in the second quarter, right? And so we started to see a lot of companies, including Tesla, benefit from this AI topic, this AI trend. However, recently, due to other several, economic data and several different patterns, technical fundamentals, etc., we've seen a little bit of a correction for the overall Nasdaq index ETF. And so, what I've been saying, I've said it in yesterday's video, and I'm going to say it again. And it's important that I repeat, some topics, and because I want you guys to fully understand the whole idea and the purpose behind this, right? So we want to see if NVIDIA does well, because of course that could start to fuel more optimism. Why? Well, again, NVIDIA has a decent weighting for the overall Nasdaq index ETF, and so that could produce positive sentiment for the markets. But what else did I mention that we want to pay attention to really understand what the move for Tesla is? Because at the end of the day, I don't think that Tesla is going to continue going up and break into all-time highs. I think, we may have a slightly bit more of a relief rally, but I don't think this is something that's going to extend. And in fact, I'm still slightly bearish on Tesla in the short term. Let's go ahead and actually look at something real quick with Tesla before I talk about the next topic, right? So we saw that Tesla rallied up today, but where did it pretty much end? Pretty much at where the peak of on the 16th and also the bottom on the 14th. So we want to pay attention. Is Tesla going to break out of that 233 price level and continue moving up? If it does, well, that's great, right? Because that shows us, okay, well, there's still price action moving upwards, and that's obviously good, right? We want to pay attention to that, because one of the things I've mentioned is that, the 230 to 215 range is, going to be a dangerous range for Tesla as we were moving down. That's what I said, right? And the reason I said that is because we have this volume pocket right here when we're looking at the volume profile, where we see there's very little volume relative to price. And if there's selling pressure when there's very little volume relative to price, that's where you see those sharp declines, right? And so that's why we saw those big candles. Inversely, if there's buying pressure, well, that's going to push the order books upwards. Why? Well, there's less of a exchange between buying and selling, and so if there's more selling, it's going to push down. Well, now today we experienced some strong buying. Well, I want to see, is Tesla going to continue buying in this pocket of low volume relative to price and take us out of this, 230 range and push us all the way up to the 258 range? That's something we want to see, right? Now, what is the topic that I mentioned in yesterday's video that we absolutely want to pay attention to for tomorrow? Well, there's a couple of things, right? So, in yesterday's video, I talked about the pretty much Jackson Hole summit, right? But what else do we have coming out tomorrow that could definitely move the markets? Well, we have Fed President Tom Barkins, right? Richmond Fed President Tom Barkins speak. And then we also have Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee, right? And I hope I didn't butcher that. Now, I do say that you want to put much more weight on what Goolsbee says, right? And this is simply because he's actually a voting member for the FOMC currently versus Tom Barkins isn't. So let me go ahead and pull up this chart over here. I like to share this every now and then. So let's go ahead and show this, right? So individuals in this section have a say. They're voting members, meaning that when it comes to make the decision for whether or not rates should be hiked, whether they should be paused or whether they should be cut, it's going to be these individuals who make that call, right? With of course, Jerome Powell being the chair of the FOMC. We want to pay attention to what these individuals say because, again, they have that vote. And so Austin Goolsbee for this year, right, because it rotates for the majority of these people, except for Jerome and John Williams, but everyone else, it rotates. So for this year, Austin Goolsbee does have a vote. But who doesn't have a vote? Thomas Barkins, right? Now, he's in a non-voting district. Now, it's not to say that what he says is something that we should absolutely disregard. No, I mean, he is obviously having conversations with a lot of these other individuals, but I often say that you want to put much more weight or much more salt on what these individuals say. And so we could possibly have either some more positive or dovish comments from Austin Goolsbee, or maybe we could have some more of a hawkish sentiment. And so that's something we want to pay attention to. But really, the big day for this week, along with the earnings for NVIDIA, sorry, I often pronounce that incorrectly, but is also the day for Thursday where we, again, have that Jackson Hole Summit where we're going to have economists, finance ministers, and, of course, Jerome Powell, all meet together, and we're going to hear Jerome Powell speak, and that's where we're going to have a, further update on where the Federal Reserve is at, or the FOMC is actually looking into in regards to monetary policy. And I often say, you want to pay attention to what ends up happening with monetary policy. Again, I get comments of people saying, oh my God, this guy talks about, fiscal policy and monetary policy and taxes and this and, debt and what else do I talk about? I talk a lot of different data points. But, you want to pay attention to everything because it provides a bigger picture. For example, why did we see a huge sell-off in 2022? Not only for Tesla. Let's go ahead and look into the overall NASDAQ index ETF. Now, there was other variables, but the main story of 2022 was inflation's high and the Federal Reserve is going to hike aggressively. And so what did we get? Well, we had rates hiked at one of the most aggressive paces that we've had in a decade, right? We saw inflation at like a 40-year all-time high. And so the Federal Reserve obviously had to come in and, step in and do their job, which I think they did it a little too late because back in 2021, back in the Jackson Hole Summit, right, they said inflation was transitory. And boy, were they severely incorrect with that, right? But they ended up doing what they had to do, which unfortunately causes pain for the overall markets because, of course, when money is more expensive to borrow, when the federal fund rate is increased and it's hiked, well, it makes it difficult, right, for everyone because, of course, individuals who are looking to spend money on their credit cards or finance for properties, well, it's much more difficult. The payments are higher. If you're a business, especially a lot of tech companies, right, it's harder to expand. And so when we have these high, federal fund rates, it takes away from the expansion of a lot of these companies where now growth isn't there, right? You have to kind of lay off people. You can't kind of keep taking on debt to grow the company. And so that's what we saw for 2022. And this is why I say you want to pay attention to monetary policy. So just to kind of reinforce what I'm saying in this video, we want to pay attention to NVIDIA. We want to pay attention to tomorrow what Austin Goolsbee says, and also to the Jackson Hole conference as well. Right now, of course, there are a couple other things you want to pay attention to. For example, the Treasury yield. The Treasury yield is tricking back up again, and that could cause some selling pressure, as I've been saying for quite a few days now as well. And we want to, let's go ahead and monitor back to Tesla, right? Let's go ahead and look at that 15-minute chart, and we want to see, does Tesla kind of break above this area right over here? If we get rejected here, well, that could signal, well, we're not necessarily back in a bull market, right? And so, of course, if you're trading or investing in Tesla, your approach is going to be severely different, right? For example, in my long-term portfolio for Tesla, I did add a little bit into my long-term portfolio as I saw, well, Tesla has been selling off, and we're seeing signs of consolidation, and we saw a little bit of an uptrend. Still not confirmation that we're uptrending, but if you guys saw my video, and I'll go ahead and I'll put it in the comment section below. It's the 3 stages of a reversal. I think it's a great video for many who may not have seen that video. When you're consolidating, that's a great area. After you see a lot of selling, that's a great area to go ahead and add in. Now again, if we see confirmation of the uptrend, right, and I talked about in other videos how to identify that confirmation, well, that's where I'm going to add in more into my long-term portfolio, right? And so That's just my approach from a long-term perspective. But of course, from a short-term perspective, we look at things from an intraday time frame, and we take advantage of when Tesla is bleeding downwards. If you're doing some multi-leg options, I'm not going to even cover that, but you could profit off the market even if it's moving sideways. There's just more sophisticated trades that you can do. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but also we take advantage of the uptrends as well when we're talking about the short term for trading. So again, one thing that I want you guys to understand is, what is your goal with Tesla? Is it something that you're investing in? Is it something that you're trading in? And perhaps your goal may be both. For example, I myself, I invest in Tesla in the long term, but I also trade Tesla in the short term as well, right? I have two separate accounts. I know sometimes people say, how can you be bullish and then bearish at the same time? Look, it's two separate accounts with two different objectives, right? And you don't even have to do that. You could also just keep it with one account, which is a long-term investing account. And when things are going down, you could sell calls. That's pretty much what Warren Buffett does, where he doesn't even have a trading account. It's just a long-term, just a portfolio going long. And when the market's falling down, well, he'll sell calls. This way you could collect premium off of, your stock not doing well, even if it's not doing well, so that you could hedge your position. I mean, there's several different approaches for the market. Of course, you have to see value in whatever you find works for you. In my specific case, again, it's just having those two separate accounts. I think it's much easier for me. But again, you are free to choose whatever you guys see value in. So let's go ahead and talk about and recap what we're talking about with Tesla. We want to see if Tesla is going to continue moving up. We want to see if it blows past this volume pocket and continues moving up. Again, we may still see some areas of rejection, and I don't think that we're still necessarily at the area where we're at this bull market, right? I don't see it yet. The data's not there. Now, if I start seeing data that confirms that, then of course, if as someone who's data dependent and you start seeing the data pointing to the signs, well, that's, things are pointing upwards, well, yeah, then I'll be bullish. But, from an economic standpoint, a lot of the data points I've been sharing exclusively with the Push and Profit private group, I don't mention all of them here, is that we're seeing, indicators like the, I can't even think of the name, the leading economic index, right, showing that the market or the overall economy still isn't that great. Right, and so there's still a lot that's pointing to the idea that things are still not that great, and so we want to stay data dependent. We want to see what ends up happening. Once we start seeing more optimism for the market, yeah, by all means, I'll be bullish. But one of the things I've said is that 2023 is going to be a 2-year type of story. We're going to have this bullish, optimistic story, which we did have, and then the second year is going to be a little rough. It's going to be shaky, right? It's going to be, I said it was like the story of two tales, kind of playing off the city of two tales, right? And so that's exactly what we've seen, right? The second half, we've seen major selling off. And right now we're seeing a little bit of a push up, but I don't think this is something that's going to sustain, too long. Of course, we want to see what ends up happening. Now, if we do see Tesla stock fall down, some people have mentioned in the comment section below, they're mentioning about a gap. I'm not sure. I've heard about the 150 area. They talk about here how Tesla has to fill that gap. It doesn't necessarily mean that Tesla always has to fill any gap that it's done in the past. But if we do see selling pressure come down tremendously, well, you could see that could be a possibility. But one thing is that around this area of 190, right, that's again where we see a lot of volume relative to price, and that's where we see this consolidation. Why? Because there's an exchange of buying and selling, and so that causes the stock to move sideways. But with that said, I don't want to keep this video any much more longer than it has. Hopefully, you guys are able to extract the utility from what I'm saying. If not, it's all fine. You guys can comment below as well. But with that said, make sure to check out the links in the description below. Let me know in the comment section, what are your thoughts with Tesla, and what's your approach with Tesla, right? Are you just only investing long term? Are you trading short term, right? It's, just interested to know. I always find that interesting. And with that said, I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.